I firmly believe there's one reason Flight 1282 averted catastrophe, and one reason only: the crew. The actions of the captain, the first officer, 4 flight attendants, and air traffic controllers on duty that day were nothing short of heroic. While climbing through about 14,830 feet, the cabin pressure dropped and the cabin altitude warning activated, followed 1 second later by the master caution alert. According to the captain, he heard a loud bang, his ears popped, his head was pushed forward, and his headset was pushed nearly off. The first officer's ears popped, and simultaneously the flight deck door blew open and her headset blew off. The captain and first officer immediately retrieved their emergency oxygen masks and put them on as they were trained to do. The first officer could see in her peripheral view through the open flight deck door that the cabin oxygen mask had dropped. She later saw the hand of a flight attendant shut the flight deck door. From that flight attendant, the flight door flung open and hit me, and hit the bathroom, and I flew. All I could think about was trying to close the door. I wasn't buckled in, but I had them around my arm, so I was at least attached to the airplane. And I remember trying to close it, and my upper back hurt so bad with all my might trying to close that flight deck door, I even used my feet. I was trying to kick it closed, and it would not close. Back on the flight deck, the captain asked the first officer to declare an emergency with air traffic control and request a lower altitude. According to the first officer, she used the audio control panel to select the overhead speaker, turned up the volume, and contacted air traffic control to declare an emergency. Both pilots said it was very loud, making it difficult for them to hear each other and the air traffic controller. Communications issues persisted throughout the remainder of the flight. In fact, the first officer said at one point she and the captain had to communicate using hand signals and by yelling to each other. The first officer pushed the altitude warning horn cutout switch to stop the continuous audible warning. She reached to the top of the glare shield panel to retrieve the quick reference checklist from its holder, but it wasn't there. She later found it behind her seat. The captain grabbed the quick reference handbook, and the first officer used it to start going through their emergency procedures. At some point, the captain said he heard the flight attendants over the cabin interphone talking about a hole in the cabin, and he tried to communicate with them multiple times to no avail. He wasn't sure whether they were okay and whether they could even hear them. Meanwhile, the flight attendants were trying to communicate with the pilots, but the noise was so loud in the cabin that they didn't know whether the pilots answered or if they were even okay. The pilots had no idea what was happening in the cabin, and the flight attendants had no idea what was happening on the flight deck. To quote the captain, it was an explosive experience. The first officer said it was chaos. Back in the cabin, the flight attendant saw 5 empty seats next to a gaping hole in row 26 and believed multiple passengers had been lost. From an interview, I look down the aisle and I see the mom of the child by the window. The mom was on the floor just screaming, like agony, and she was shaking. I was holding her. I said, "What's going on? What's happening?" And she just says, "I was holding my son, and I think my son blew out." That's when I lift up my head and I saw the hole and I just started shaking. It wasn't until the crew deplaned that they learned they didn't lose a single passenger, that all crew members were accounted for. Throughout this meeting, you'll hear more about what it was like on board Flight 1282 that day. I think what's most inspiring to me, and I would imagine this entire board, is amidst absolute chaos, and I imagine fear, the crew members were laser focused on the safety of their passengers. Using supplemental oxygen, the flight attendants ran up and down the aisle to check on passengers, never forgetting the most vulnerable on board, 3 lap children and 4 unaccompanied minors, one of whom was just 6 years old. He had turned 6 just about a week before, and it was his first time flying. I hope everyone in this room or watching online takes away a newfound appreciation and respect for the men and women who protect us in the air and on the ground. Above all, these highly trained professionals are there for our safety. Safety. That's the promise the Flight 1282 crew delivered on. Despite the harrowing circumstances, every single crew member performed their safety duties with the highest degree of professionalism and competence, remaining calm in the most turbulent of times. They are why all 177 souls on board Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 deplaned safely at the gate. And I want to take a moment on behalf of the entire agency to commend the entire crew. This doesn't just happen. Every single crew member we interviewed credited their training. We at the NTSB examine training in every accident we investigate, in every transportation mode. Why? Because it can and often does make the difference between life and death. When every second counts, as it did on Flight 1282, training to the point of muscle memory is paramount. In this case, the crew knew precisely what to do. They acted without hesitation, and it saved lives. And yet the crew shouldn't have had to be heroes, because this accident never should have happened.